afternoon, and welcome to the Jewish Policy Center webinar. I'm Shoshana Bryan, Senior Director of the JPC and your host. In keeping with our policy since the 7th of October, we are not here to give you up-to-the-minute military information about what's happening in Gaza or in Israel. The flood isn't manageable. We can't do that. Although I strongly recommend that you find a couple of really reliable news sources and check in with them. Our job here is to provide context, to provide a broader framework into which you can put all the little fragments of information that you're getting. Today, we're going to learn more about the Arab reaction to the war that Hamas began on October 7th with a horrific massacre of more than 1,400 Israelis and the vicious wounding of 5,000 other people and the kidnapping of 200 more. Hamas rockets continued to land in Israel. So what do Israel's neighbors think? You know, Israel has neighbors that are at peace with it. Israel has neighbors that are at war with it. And Israel has a lot of neighbors that are just hanging out there. What are they thinking? Our guest today is Hussain Abdul-Hussain. I'm going to give you a full introduction later, but Hussain is a watcher of the Arab world and a native Arabic speaker. So we're going to learn something about how the Arabs see the region, how the Arabs see Israel, and how the Arabs see this war. But first, your JPC commercial, because you knew I was going to get that in there. The Jewish Policy Center was established in 1985 as a nonprofit organization, providing analysis of both foreign and domestic policies. We support a strong American defense capability, U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense. Most important right now, we support the legitimacy and security of Israel against anyone who would deny it. And now more than ever, we support the efforts of the government of Israel and the IDF to defend the people of Israel and bring the perpetrators of the massacres and the kidnappers to justice. As an organization that sits slightly to the right of center, the JPHC advocates for small government, low taxes, free trade, fiscal responsibility, energy security, and free speech and intellectual diversity. Free speech being one of those subjects we're going to have to address in more detail later. You can find us on our website at jewishpolicycenter.org. That's jewishpolicycenter.org. There you can read our Insight articles and our magazine In Focus Quarterly. You can find our previous webinar programs. And as you know, this is a double week. We have Hussain Abdul-Hussain today, and we also have Professor Ephraim Imbar tomorrow. So go to our website, jewishpolicycenter.org, and you can sign up for tomorrow's webinar. And now our guest. Hussain Abdul-Hussain is a research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. So when I say to you, you should have a reliable source for information on what's going on a daily basis in Israel and in Gaza, FDD, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, that's one of those places. Hussain focuses on the Gulf region and Yemen, including on Gulf relations with Iran and the Gulf peace with Israel. Born and raised in Beirut, Baghdad, and Baalbek, which sounds like the title of his next book, he has a degree in history and archaeology from the American University of Beirut. He worked as a reporter and later as managing editor of Beirut's The Daily Star newspaper. He's reported from war zones, including in Lebanon and in Iraq. Here in Washington, he has helped to manage the Arabic satellite network Al Hura, Iraq, after which he headed the Washington bureau of the Kuwaiti daily Al Rai. He's been a visiting fellow at London's Chatham House and has published in English in the New York Times and the Washington Post, one of the few authors in those two publications that you should actually read. He's in Arabic everywhere. He's also been quoted everywhere that you imagine he should be and would be, including this morning he was on Fox, and you should probably go find a link for that. Before Hussain went to FTD, we met on Twitter, which is like using a blind dating service. You never really know who you're talking to. However, over time, we have gotten to know each other, and I think that Hussain Abdul-Hussain is the most credible and one of the most important people in Washington right now, in the middle of a war where you have to know what's going on all sides. His article, Why There Is No Palestinian State, is a must read, and you can find that on our website under In Focus, which is another reason for me to give you our website, jewishpolicycenter.org. And now, Hussain Abdul-Hussain, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shoshana. Thanks for having me on. Let me start by apologizing that I'm talking from airport. In case you hear any announcements, you don't have to run anyway. This said, you're probably following and you see how everyone got angry at the UN Secretary General for saying that the attack on October 7, the Hamas massacre of 1,400 Israeli civilians, did not come out of nowhere, that nothing comes out of vacuum. While I disagree with that, I also have to say that, yes, it did not come out of nowhere. The Hamas attack was designed to thwart normalization efforts between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So until October 6th, the Saudis and the Israelis were engaged in indirect peace talks through US mediation. And things were improving and they were getting somewhere. On September 9, the White House announced the plan for the construction of the IMEC, the India Middle East Corridor, which would have connected India to the Mediterranean through a railway that went through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. I think Hamas wanted to stop all of this integration that was going on, the peace that was going on. And this is partially why Hamas broke all the rules of the game that we know of. This game has been going on between Hamas and Israel since 2007, when Hamas took over the Strip, not through election, like you would read in most foreign and Western and especially US media, but through a coup. So Hamas took over after killing 450 Palestinians who work for the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. They started their rule with a massacre of Palestinians. So I was not surprised when I saw them bursting out of Gaza to commit another massacre. This time it was against Israelis. So this, in a nutshell, is what was going on. By bursting out of Gaza, Hamas changed the rules. Until then, rules had been just to war across the fence. And Israel and Hamas had been engaged in 6 rounds of war before this one. This time, Hamas changed the rules, and this time, Israel too is changing the rules and has decided that there's no way to live with Hamas. Plus, now we know that living behind the fence is not safe enough. Even if Israel wanted to go back to October 6th, now we know that Hamas can fly over the fence, can bulldoze the fence, and can repeat the massacre that it did. And hence why Israel correctly announced that Hamas should go. Now, how's the Arab reaction? How's the Arab countries' reaction? This would be somehow interesting, because if you're not really trained, if you're not familiar with what's going on over there, it might look to you as if everyone is angry and crazy and shouting and pushing in the same direction. It might seem like they are shouting and pushing in the same direction, but if you look closer, you will see a huge gap. You have 2 camps. The first camp that's led by Iran, and in this camp you can find Iraq and the pro-Iran militias. You can find Syria, the militias that are in Syria, the pro-Iran militias. You can find Lebanon, which doesn't have a government, which is dominated and managed by Hezbollah, pro-Iran Hezbollah anyway. And you also have the Houthis in Yemen. Houthis are a militia that rule Yemen, and they are pro-Iran. This is one camp. The other camp is led by Saudi Arabia, which was trying to normalize ties with Israel. It also has the UAE and Bahrain, and these two have signed the Abraham Peace Accords in 2020. And it has Egypt and Jordan, who already have peace treaties with Israel. What the first camp is saying, the Iran camp, has been saying that war is the only way to deal with the situation between Israel and the Palestinians. So the only way is to destroy Israel, to have Hamas rule and create an Islamic Palestine state instead of Israel. What the other camp, the Saudi-led Arab camp, has been saying, they've been saying that peace is the only alternative to what's going on. They're saying, we support peace, we do not support war, let's stop the war, and choose peace. So there's a huge difference between how each side looks at this. Now, they might intersect in calling for a ceasefire. The Iranians think that the ceasefire is good. That'll probably hold back Israel from destroying Hamas. The Saudis and the other Arab countries cannot say no to a ceasefire because it'll make them look as if they oppose peace, because naturally peace would come with this. You have to stop war in order to go for peace. Another note that I can say about the relationship between Hamas and Saudi Arabia and the UAE, Gulf countries, especially the Saudis and the Emiratis, are against the Muslim Brotherhood. They have placed the Muslim Brotherhood on their list of foreign terrorist organizations. They did that in 2016 and 2017. Hamas is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. So the UAE and Saudi Arabia have no love lost toward Hamas. They are against Hamas. They want to see Hamas gone. The only thing is that they're sitting now and watching and thinking, if Israel is going to take out our enemy Hamas, so why be on the bad side of the popular moods? Just sit back and call for a ceasefire and watch Israel take out your enemy, after which we can go back to peace. I'll remind you that yesterday in the evening, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman talked to President Biden. And what the Saudi top official said was that Saudi Arabia is waiting until this war is over to resume peace talks. So thankfully, if Iran or Hamas thought that by waging this war they'd kill peace talks, they haven't. They only put it on hold, and obviously no one now has time or energy or the bandwidth to be talking about normalization, since Israel is busy going after Hamas, and since everybody else is doing something. So this is how the picture looks from the Arab world. When you see people taking to the street, number one, take a closer look where these protests are happening. Most of them are happening in Arab countries under the control of Iran, or that are allied with Iran. So for example, Algeria, it's not under the control of Iran, but it is allied with Iran and what's called the resistance axis in the region. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan is an exception. I think the Jordanian government has been trying to walk on the fence. On one side, they try to be populist. They haven't denounced the Hamas massacre. On the other side, I assume that there's some sort of cooperation, at least in terms of security and defense, for other issues that are not out in the public. So this is what's going on the Arab side. I know that Shoshana has a long list of questions for me, but I'll be happy to take them and other questions too.
Thank you, Hussain. That's a really good start for. You're right. I have a lot of questions. The first one is, you mentioned Jordan and suggested that there's probably some level of cooperation under the table between Jordan and Israel, as there often is. However, on the surface, things are not looking too good. What happened to the meeting between President Biden and the King of Jordan and Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority and President Sisi from Egypt? They were supposed to get together and talk about this, and it got canceled, I understand, maybe you know better, by the Palestinians first and then the king. What went on?
Well, what happened, and I think they probably regret canceling that summit. What happened was that on the eve of the summit, reports surfaced that Israel had attacked Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza and that there were 500 casualties. Now, of course, no one cared to vet the news. So this news started with Al Jazeera Arabic. It came from Hamas. It went to Al Jazeera, and everyone, including Western media, started reporting this as a matter of fact. As time went by and as Western intelligence agencies took a closer look, we now know that this could not have been Israel. The most likely culprit would have been an errant rocket fire. Islamic Jihad did fire a salvo of rockets on Israel. One of these rockets didn't go all the way and just fell short and caused a fire that probably killed a few Palestinians. So this calling of the summit was peak populism on the part of both Mahmoud Abbas and the Jordanian king, to a lesser extent Sisi. The thing is that the Jordanian king couldn't have possibly held the summit without having Mahmoud Abbas on the summit. If Mahmoud Abbas boycotted, this would have made the Jordanian king look really bad. So Jordanian king and Egyptian president had to just abide by what Abbas decided to how Abbas decided to behave. And in all honesty, Abbas has been probably the most populist of everybody else. I just opened this discussion by reminding everyone that in 2007, Hamas did kill 450 Palestinians who worked for Mahmoud Abbas. So, and since then, Abbas has not talked to Hamas, not a single word. They haven't talked since. So Hamas, so Abbas really hates the Hamas, but at the same time, he's not willing to say it out loud. And there was one interview that he gave in which he said that Hamas doesn't represent the Palestinian people, which is true because Hamas is not one of the factions that's on the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. But he retracted that statement. So Abbas is being very populist and he's acting very cowardly. And I think this is what led to killing that summit that was scheduled with President Biden in Jordan.
So on the theme of populism, is that what accounts for Queen Reina's statement from Jordan, where she said there never has been such suffering of a people as is going on in Gaza? She didn't use the word genocide, but she did say that there never has been such suffering of people. I would suggest she's wrong, but she is a Palestinian and she is married to a Hashemite king, and he, as you said, walks a fine line. Tell us about the line. What's going on in Jordan that he worries about in terms of Palestinians?
Well, look, if you're Arab and you watch what's going on in Gaza, myself included, it's hard not to say that you regret the death of these Palestinians. But absolutely. I think the buck should stop there. I think this should not lead all the way to populism. This should not mean that you do not denounce the Hamas massacre of October 7. I don't think these two things go against one another. But I'm not a politician. I don't run any country, and don't have any base that's waiting for what I say. I think what the Jordanian royalty are trying to say is that yes, we support the Palestinians, but most of the time they stop short of actually denouncing Israel. And this is the trend in the statements of most of these countries. If you look up the Saudi statements, Emirati statements, they say that the killing should stop, but they never go all the way to say, like, Israel is to blame, or there's war crimes being committed by Israel. So they avoid all of these accusations that usually come either from Iran or from American universities, for example. So unfortunately, so that, I mean, I disagree with what the Queen said, and I would have really wanted her to say something along the lines that there's nothing as bad as killing 1,400 Israeli civilians. I mean, nothing can explain it. No amount of injustice that has befallen Palestinians can justify this. Unfortunately, she didn't, and I think that's the part that people like me didn't like.
We didn't like it either. So you mentioned demonstrations here. Am I right in thinking that the biggest, loudest, most anti-Israel and anti-Semitic demonstrations are actually not being held in the Middle East? We're kind of historically accustomed to that. But this time I think you're seeing them in Western Europe and the United States. Is that true? I mean, you watch.
That's unfortunately true. I watch them, and I have many friends in Western countries who support such line. And our friendship is currently not on the best of terms. And I think this is unfortunate because these are the Arabs who have the freedom of expression. And you can express what you have on mind, as opposed to the Arabs who live over there, who, if they break with the majority voice, they'll be socially shamed or physically harassed and abused. So I'm saying this because, you know, I know that even here in the West, there are many dissenting voices like mine. But even here in the West, these voices are scared to come out. The same issues the same problems that chase them over there will chase them here. They probably have family who live in countries like Lebanon or Iraq or other Arab countries. They have family who live here who can social shame them. So it's many factors, but this is only part of the problem. You know, what's really interesting is that most of the time the people who are most anti-Semitic are not really the Arabs who live here. They're, you know, the decolonizing crowd that lives in this country, that's not necessarily Arab. I mean, you know, a big chunk of it is even Jewish Americans. And these people are obsessed with the idea of decolonization. And to my mind is that the absolute majority of these people did not spend more than a week in that part of the world. They don't know what's going on over there. They think that all the ills of these countries, like in Gaza or in Iraq or in Syria, that all the ills are caused by colonial Western imperials, and that if we take those away, then everything will work out. Now, to these, I've had a few discussions and debates and heated debates with these people, and I always cite the example that I lived, you know, I witnessed. In Lebanon during the 90s, I think the discussion was that Lebanon was in a bad shape because Israel was occupying part of the south. Now, Israel was in the south because, you know, there were at one point there were Palestinian attacks against northern Israel. But then everyone was saying, well, if Israel withdraws, Lebanon will be, you know, this magnificent country. So Israel did withdraw in the year 2000. And if you look up any trend line in Lebanon between 1995 and today, you'll see that it has been going down. Every trend line has gone down. So this is the best proof that neither Israel nor Western colonial, some sort of white man, European something is responsible. We have to give these people agency. And this offends me as someone with Arab heritage. I say, you know, don't act as if these people, you know, can't be blamed. They have agency. They have responsibility. You know, they can work hard. They can improve things. We can't just throw everything on the U.S. or Western countries or Israel. So that's the biggest disagreement I have with these people. And, you know, unfortunately, they don't listen. And that's why you see them. You see, like you said, you see that the crowds are much bigger on Western universities, on U.S. campuses, than they are, say, at the American University of Cairo or even the American University of Beirut. So, and to my mind, that's really unfortunate.
So let me throw in another angle to that. So the colonialists left, and I'm thinking here about Lebanon, the French left, and then the Israelis left. But into that space, you don't only have Lebanese people with agency, you also had Iran arming and training people. And it seems to me that ungoverned space or ill-governed space or under-governed space, any way you want to put it, leaves an opening for a country like Iran. And so you have Iran in the West Bank, you have Iran in the Gaza Strip, you have it in Lebanon, you have it in Syria, you have it in Iraq. In order for this war to end, and for the Lebanese to reclaim their sovereignty in a serious way, we have to get rid of Iran, the mullahs, not the people of Iran. But is it necessary to go to the heart of the beast and take it out? Is everything else just mowing the grass?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind. Over the past 30 years, I've been doing this, that Iran is the biggest problem behind all of the other problems that we see happening today. And I think at one point, I was living there at the time. Sometimes during the 90s, the situation was much better. I mean, look at Gaza. Try to Google Gaza International Airport, and you'll get pictures of the first couple, President Clinton and First Lady Hillary Clinton, standing in Gaza City in 1998 next to Yasser Arafat and his wife, and inaugurating the international airport of Gaza. So this is unimaginable now that you see an American president standing in Gaza City. So by any stretch, by any measure, things were much better in 1985 and 1995. And then ever since Hamas took over, things have been going down. And this is the model that Iran offers the region. It's not only a policy, it's a model for Iran. I mean, Iran itself is going down. Iran itself is governed by a militia that's called the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. And this militia is much stronger than the sovereign government. In fact, the government is useless as not sovereign. And that's why you always say it doesn't matter who gets elected president in Iran. And there's no point for CNN or anybody else to go and interview the Iranian president. These people are just puppets. The actual power is with the supreme leader and his IRGC. And this model was replicated in Iraq. It was replicated in Lebanon, in Gaza. They've been trying to replicate it in Syria. It was replicated in Yemen too, where you have a militia unaccountable to anyone, any government, anyone who's elected, that runs the show, that takes people to war, and that blames everything on the West and Israel. And when you do that, you'll be living in an ongoing status of war. You'll be living on a war footing forever. And we in the US and the West, we wouldn't accept that to ourselves, you know. We used to criticize the US for standing on a war footing for a long time. So how can we accept that Hamas would just keep on fighting until forever? I mean, you know, talk about double standards. That's you know, really in the news these days.
So this leads us to a question that someone sent in. U.S. forces in the Middle East have been attacked several times in the last week. This listener says 13 times in the last week. Two questions. Under what circumstances do you think the United States will respond? And I guess the flip side of that is, why haven't we responded yet? It all goes to the same question. If Iran is at the center and Iran is even now attacking our forces, how do we deal with that?
So I think what we have to do is not to respond to whoever fired at us. I think what we have to do, and now since Hamas changed the rules of the game, I think we too have to change the rules of the regional game. We can tell the Iranians openly and through third parties, through diplomatic channels. We say, listen, if anything happens to our troops anywhere in the region by any one of your militias, we are going to strike inside of Iran. You are not safe. Our troops are not safe. Now, if you establish that balance of terror with the Iranians, I think they will sit back. And you know me, I was not the biggest advocate of President Trump's policies, but I was totally supportive of him taking out Soleimani. And if you look out of the period after taking out Soleimani until the election of President Biden, the Iranians didn't enrich anything, even though we had pulled out of the horrible nuclear deal. So this is how the Iran regime works. They take your measures, they see where's the red line, and they act accordingly. So if the red line is their own safety, then they won't move. If the red line is that, you know, okay, you strike us in Syria, we strike you back in Syria or in Iraq, then they'll keep on doing it. Now, why are we not doing it? I think for no obvious reason, this administration just stayed with the Iranian policy, with the idea that we can revive the Iranian nuclear deal for a long time. If you remember, during the Obama years, the idea was that we can have a grand bargain with Iran. That the Iranian regime is reasonable enough that we can reason with them. We take off the sanctions, and they become like any other country. Now we know that this grand bargain, grand deal will never ever happen. So what are we waiting for? I mean, what is President Biden waiting for? Just tell the Iranians, you know, these are the rules. Hit us, hit Israel. Your own safety is at stake, and watch what happens next. And by the way, I don't think that the war will happen. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong. I'm not warmongering here. I'm just saying, you know, they know that we have the muscle, and if they see that we're serious, I think they will step back.
Do you think they will activate Hezbollah at some point? There have been small clashes at the borders. There has been some, you know, So two questions come out of this. Number one, do you think they will? And number two, what do you think the Arab states will think if that happens? Is it going to break down along the same lines that Israel and Hamas breaks down for the Arab states, or is it different?
Well, to the second part of the answer, what the Arab states will do if there's war between Hezbollah and Israel is that they will not support Hezbollah a bit. They have a bigger problem with Hezbollah than the one that they have with Hamas.
Ah.
And at least in the case of Hamas, there's some sort of justification that they're Palestinian casualties. In the case of Lebanon, there's no justification whatsoever that Hezbollah be involved in any kind of war with Israel. Now, the question is, will that Iran instruct Hezbollah to enter the war? Before the war, Nasrallah, Hezbollah chief, gave many speeches in which he promised that if there's ever war with any one of these militias, including Hamas, that there'll be what he called the unification of the fronts, which means all the militias will fight together against Israel. So now the war comes to him, and he finds himself in a situation where that he promised to go to war, but at the same time he doesn't want to go to war. All of Lebanon opposes war. If Iran instructs Nasrallah to go to war, he will go to war despite what the Lebanese want or think. We know that. But the question is, when will Iran order or instruct Hezbollah to go to war? I think to understand the answer to this question, you have to think of Hezbollah as the last resort. It's the kind of, if the Iran regime feels itself in danger, Hezbollah is the glass that you break to save yourself. So they're saving Hezbollah in case of Israel or the US or anybody just decides to strike inside Iran and say take out the nuclear program, or strike inside Iran for other reasons. So Hezbollah is a strategic asset for the Iranians, and they often use Hezbollah not only in Lebanon. They used it in the Syrian civil war. They used it to target our troops in Iraq. So Hezbollah is really very important for the Iranians, and they're not willing to risk Hezbollah go into war with Israel like what happened in 2006, only to save Hamas. Now we have public statements from Khalid Mish'al, the Hamas chief, in which he says, we're grateful to whatever Hezbollah has been doing across the border with Israel, but we really need more. They have to do more. And this tells you that Hamas has been so far disappointed that the allies have not come to the rescue, that they sort of thrown Hamas under the bus. What's the situation on the ground? So far, Hezbollah has not used any of its big missiles that would activate the Iron Dome. What they've been using is the ones that you carry that are handheld, the anti-tank missiles. And these have a limited range of, say, 2K or 3K, like 2 miles. So as long as this is the case, the clashes will be restricted to 3 to 3, like some sort of 5 miles from both sides. So this will not go into full-scale war escalation. Especially Israel is at this point. I don't think Israel is interested to be distracted to the northern border. They have enough to deal with Gaza and Hamas.
I think that's true. And Hezbollah also, I suppose, has to take account of the fact that the U.S. has large ships in the Mediterranean at the moment. I'm not sure that we'll use them. I'm very unclear about U.S. war aims in this situation. But if I were Hezbollah, I'd have to worry about it at least a little bit. So let's turn you back, though, to what I originally asked you to do, which is media. Someone asked the question, is there a difference in the Arab world in terms of what Arab people see every night when they turn on the TV or they go to the radio between the legacy media, newspapers, radio, interview programs, and what they see on social media, WhatsApp, TikTok, Instagram, whatever? And could that create a division between, let's say, the older people in those countries and the younger people? Are young people getting stoked by TikTok videos, or do they want nothing to do with this issue?
So on social media, they have the same issue that we have in this country, that social media is designed in such a way that will show you whatever you're interested in seeing. And they end up living in echo chambers with very slight time that they engage in debate with the other side. So social media is not really a source of information. I mean, it reinforces what these people have in mind, but it's not a source of information for them. Now, the traditional media in the Arab countries, this is divided. They're split. You have one that's led by Al Jazeera and Qatar, and you have one that's led by Saudi Arabia, its flagship Al Arabiya satellite, and other satellite TVs that belong to the UAE or Bahrain or these guys, even Egypt and Jordan. So if you watch these two camps, you will find out that there's a huge difference between the two. Al Jazeera is just instigation. It's straight out anti-Semitism. It'll almost say kill all the Jews. Now they don't say it, but that's the impression that you get. They never call Hamas anything but resistance. They never call the war anything but Israeli aggression on Gaza, even though we know who started this. So Al Jazeera is pure propaganda, and they get people on the air to reinforce their message, and they have enormous, unlimited amount of resources. Like they have a live position reporter in every spot. If you take the Lebanese-Israeli border, they probably have 5 or 6 correspondents on each side, and it's a tiny space over there anywhere. You could probably drive like 15 minutes between every correspondent and the other correspondent. So Al Jazeera is enormous, and they're instigating against Israel. Al Arabiya is much more nuanced. You would see a few of the pundits that go on just flaring up from time to time, but overall the editorial line is much more professional. They try to avoid emotional kind of reporting or stoking anger. They have had Israeli guests all the time. For example, they interviewed Khalid Mash'al, the chief of Hamas, who lives in Doha. They gave him 40 minutes or 50 minutes of interview, and right after him, they invited on Avi Dichter from Israel to offer a source of a rebuttal to Mash'al. So they have an interest in keeping things poised and keeping heads cool, and as I said yesterday, MBS talked to President Biden and said, we're just waiting for this to be over to go back to peace. So Al Arabiya understands that they're not breaking any, they're not taking any one-way tickets with Israel. They're just trying to be as balanced as they can. And the people in the region, I think, they understand what they're getting. So the more moderate ones are watching the Saudi media, and the ones who support Hamas, or maybe the ones who live on US campuses, are watching Al Jazeera. That's how things are.
Sort of like MSNBC and Fox here. So
absolutely, that's exactly.
You tend to watch the media that already ascribes to your political proclivities instead of watching the other guys. I've always argued that people who believe Fox News should watch MSNBC, because you have to know what the other people are thinking, and vice versa. So I guess they have the same issues in the Arab world, which is interesting because it indicates more freedom of expression than I think some people believe existed there. So would you say, if you're looking, and I know every country is different because that's how it goes, but if you're looking across the broad span of the Arab world, do they have a wide range to choose from? So they have these two, but are they also watching CNN? Are they also watching Sky News or BBC? Do they have a lot to choose from in their own context?
Well, they do, but you have to keep in mind that not all Arabs can understand CNN or BBC. Sometimes they go to BBC Arabic or other services. Now, as someone who's worked for Arabic media, I have to say that usually the average Arabic network will give you a lot of freedom on issues that they do not care about. So, like any reporting on Ukraine, you get all kinds of opinions, with, for, pro, against. And this applies even to issues within, like, issues in Iraq or in Egypt. So when they don't care about something, it's totally freedom of expression. But when they have, stakes, when they have, their own policy, then they try to just put their foot down and send it in a specific direction. So Al Jazeera clearly has an agenda for this whole Hamas and Israel thing. The Saudis don't really have an agenda. I mean, their agenda is just, be nice and seek peace and try to stop the fighting and, be sympathetic with casualties. And that's why you have a bigger audience and a bigger participation of pundits, mind you, because when you invite people, if you have a specific editorial line, you'll end up having only 10 pundits who support your line. Whereas if you have a wider margin, then you have a bigger diversity and variety of pundits who will join you. So I think for an average Arab, they will get a fairly healthy amount of choice, of media, and between Western media, local media, the Qataris, the Saudis. I think they should be covered. They should be fine.
So would you say then, has there been a change, do you think, in Arab countries' opinions of the United States before and after October 7th? People basically understood that the United States was Israel's ally. President Biden came out with some very, very strong comments about what happened in Israel and about the United States sticking with Israel. Does that change how Arabs in general, and I know I'm asking you to generalize about a lot of people across a very, very large region. So if you don't want to do that, you don't have to, but I'll ask you. How do they view the United States? Has it changed since the 4th of October, the 7th of October?
Well, I don't think they have a specific, I mean, they understand that the US is the biggest and staunchest ally of Israel. And that's not something necessarily that they want to fight against or be angry at. What they're interested in, I think at this point, many Arabs think that America is a democracy. And if you can change public opinion, then maybe, you can put some distance between Israel and the US. And that's one of the reasons why you see this, why you see Al Jazeera and the pro-Iran media trying all the time to drill the idea that there are war crimes that are being committed in Gaza. So they think that if they get the Americans angry enough at these images, then they will get the US to force Israel to step back. So the point here is that they don't look at the US as having a line that's unshakable. They think that they can sway public opinion. So my role as someone who goes very often, someone who lives in Washington and goes very often to explain the US point of view, I say, guys, listen, no American opinion will ever accept 1,400 Israelis to be killed in cold blood and then say, okay, maybe, maybe we should reason with Israel not to take out Hamas. And I keep on giving them the examples that, as Americans, we know are true, that, look, even senators who are not best friends of Israel, even Senator Bernie Sanders, even former President Barack Obama, even these guys who are either neutral or maybe to the side of the Palestinians more than Israel, even these guys have come out in force in support of Israel. So if you have to understand why this is happening, you have to understand the logic of the US. I mean, at the end of the day, we do protect democracies. And we do like other democracies like us, and we don't want non-combatants to die. So, and more often than not, I get positive response. I mean, I get people who say, "Well, you can visit us." I mean, that's how things happen in Washington.
Well, I don't know. Secretary of State Blinken doesn't entirely agree with you because he was publicly saying that it's time to break the cycle of violence. And the only way to end this is with a two-state solution for Israel and the Palestinians. I suspect the Israelis were not happy to hear that. The Palestinians, I imagine it's a mixed bag, frankly. I would imagine that many Palestinians might like to be rid of Hamas as well. Where do you go with that, though? Where would Arab states go with that? Would they say, well, yeah, the secretary's right. We need a Palestinian state. Is he speaking to an audience that's listening?
So number one, if we need a Palestinian state or the two-state solution, we need enough Palestinians who want the two-state solution. So it's not enough for the US or Israel, all the Arab countries to say two-state solution, and then the Palestinians say, no, that doesn't work for us. So until we get enough Palestinians who say that, and we know that Hamas charter calls for the destruction of Israel and the creation of an Islamic Palestine in its place. And Hamas in opinion polls, the last time I checked before the war, they had the support of 1/3 of the Palestinians. And you add the other factions, and you have at least 1/2 of Palestinians who support the idea of having the whole thing for themselves. So I mean, let's start with the Palestinians. If the Palestinians come to us and say, okay, maybe now we're thinking of a two-state solution, it might be something worth considering. Now, number two here is that peace doesn't have to come after we decide on the states, even including between Israelis and Palestinians. We can start with peace. We can sign all kinds of peace treaties and then talk about what sort of self-government or sovereignty or independence of shape of Palestine. We don't have to withhold peace until we figure out all the arrangements that go between Palestinians and Israelis. And I think that's where the Saudis were going. And that's where the Emiratis went. They said, okay, we're signing peace, and we're using our peaceful ties with Israel to try to get an arrangement that's in the best interest of the Palestinians. Whether it's self-government, whether it's independence, whether it's demilitarized state, it can be anything. So I'd say this is very far off. And by us trying to put the end game ahead of everything else and say, okay, two-state solution, and let's start from here, I think this is really very far off. So let's start with peace and, and work from there.
Or maybe not even starting with peace. It seems to me that the real importance of the Abraham Accords was to set the issue aside long enough for people on both sides to consider their positions. The Arab states of the Gulf had their own specific national interests. Israel had interests. Leaving the Palestinians to the side for a moment would allow them to decide, do you want to get in or do you not want to get in? And that's, as you were saying, you need to see where the Palestinians themselves want to go. So maybe what we should be looking at is the furtherance of the concept of the Abraham Accords, that the Arab states and Israel decide what works best for them, keep a seat at the table for the Palestinians, and at the time that they can or want to or have to, they can join. So it seems to me maybe that's an out. I don't know.
Well, let me add, as someone who's been on this peace thing since forever, I think we need more clarity. We need to tell Arabs, not give wrong impressions. Okay, the Israeli state will be a Jewish state. You have to accept that and recognize it and pronounce it. Not only two states, one of them Israel, and not say that Israel is a Jewish state. Jewish sovereignty is part of the deal, of the peace deal. We have to say that no one thinks that demographics is a hidden weapon. It's out in the open. I mean, we understand what's going on. So we have to put these out in the open and sort them out. Because so far, what was happening during peace was that, okay, I'll say I accept Israel, but I wouldn't say that, with Israel comes what I call the right of return. That's okay, then you'll have one Arab Palestine and one Israel that's half Arab, half Jewish. Oh, that doesn't work. So all these things have to be discussed honestly and frankly, not just like, headlines and then blame everyone when the headlines don't work out. Let's just, be frank in this conversation.
So we're coming to the end of the program. I have to ask you a last question. And I go two ways here because people who have been listening to us for a long time, and we're now 3 years into this, more than 3 years into this, I'm always looking for an optimistic, positive answer to the last question. The last couple of weeks, it's been very difficult to find an optimistic ending to the program, but some of my guests have managed to do it. So here's your question. You just outlined a mechanism that would take people forward to a better region, a better series of countries, a better time in their lives. Can we get there?
Absolutely, we can get there. And I think Israel is correct to take out Hamas. And I call on all Arab friends and governments and, to pitch in to help Israel do that. I mean, not militarily, but apparently we have so many things that we can do to support this idea, that we have to take out anyone who opposes peace, anyone who wants to destroy the other party. But I'm hopeful, and I think that this war will not go forever. And I'm hopeful that we know that once the shooting stops, the Arabs, mainly Saudi Arabia, are ready, are standing by and ready for peace. And that makes me hopeful. And I hope it makes you too hopeful.
It does, actually. It's a good way to end the program. Hussain Abdul-Hussain, thank you again for a really important look into the thinking and the minds and the hopes and desires of the Arab world, because we don't get that. I mean, there's an awful lot that goes on that we don't see. We don't speak Arabic, most of us. You do, we don't. And it really helps us to put the war and the region and the hopes for the future into perspective. Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure, Shoshana, always.
We're going to ask you back, believe me. To our listeners, Professor Ephraim Imbar tomorrow. Go on our website, sign up noon tomorrow, and I hope to see you again. Hussain, thank you.
Thank you.